Hi, I'm Dajana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science-backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Today's interview with Emilie Delworth, the peaceful mother. Hello, Emilie. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're talking about raising resilient children. Specifically for your discussion, we're going to do a deep dive into teaching children tools for emotion regulation. And, we hear so much about emotional regulation in parents and in children, but so often I think parents want to know, like, give me the tools, give me something that's concrete, practical that I can start using today, like tell me what to do, tell me what to say. So I'd love for you to kick us off with a little bit about a background about how you got into this work and the importance of raising children with emotion regulation.
Sure. So I have a long background in child development, early childhood education, working with young children. I worked in preschools and as a nanny for nearly 2 decades, specializing in infant, toddler, and preschool care. And so, I was very aware, both from my experience and then also from my education, of just how important it was to raise emotionally intelligent children. It's, kind of the precursor for success in all other areas of their life. And also something that is kind of more recently understood. I think society's had a very emotions are bad, or, we have our judgments of them and just there's no use for them. Just move on, just suppress them and move on and stuff like that. And how that's really not serving society. So yeah, just really 2 decades of experience in dealing with tantrums and all of that hardship. And so really understanding that. And then I became a mom and I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. Like, I have no tools for emotion regulation. I was struggling with anger and really just scary rage. And so I was like, okay, well, I wasn't taught these tools as a child. Like, I was taught destructive forms of anger expression. And I was, taught so many dysfunctional things around emotions. And so it was this process of having to unlearn that and learn how to regulate my own emotions and learn that I couldn't do that if my nervous system wasn't first regulated and feeling safe enough to do that. And so as I went down that path of learning that for myself and with the background that I had working with children, I was like, okay, I've got to introduce my daughter to these concepts early. And so, that's what I did. And I introduced her to, just kind of naming her own emotions and things like that around 15 months. And by 2 years old, she was doing a lot of the tools that I'll be sharing in a little bit. She started doing those with me as well. So.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. I mean, I think you're so on point with starting early just because the habits are formed so early on and we don't even realize it half the time in parenting until we're like, what's my child doing? But how does can you tell us a little bit about how emotional regulation relates to resiliency? How would you define resiliency and how does emotional regulation support a child in becoming more resilient?
Yeah, I mean, resiliency is really about, life is full of adversities. Like, there's, even with the most wonderful parents, the most wonderful home life is hard. We go through disappointments. There's difficulties in making friends or keeping friends as we go throughout our childhood and adulthood. Things happen, car accidents, natural disasters, our parents might get divorced, things happen in life and it's hard. We want to be able to instill in our children, the tools that they need in order to face those adversities in a way that they can kind of take on the adversity and process that in a healthy way and then still thrive and still, live out their greatest potential and live a joyful, innocent childhood and grow into healthy adults. And so, we have to really support that resiliency, that ability to kind of pivot and, bob and weave and stuff throughout life when life gives you some hardships and stuff.
I think there's sometimes a misconception too about children that tend to be more sensitive to their emotions because they're more aware of their emotions. So they're maybe more expressive in their emotions. There's some misconception that maybe they're less resilient. I don't know if you've heard that, like, like if they're always, not always, but if they cry about things or if they're just aware of their emotions, it's almost like this cultural misconception about resiliency that they're not as sturdy and they're not as strong in surviving difficult moments. But the opposite of that is true, correct? Like feelings wise?
Absolutely. I mean, I was the sensitive child. My daughter is very much the sensitive child. And I think a lot of it is just that society has misconceptions about sensitivity and
Right.
about emotions. Like I said, so much of society sees emotions as they're a problem. They're just these irrational, problematic things, forgetting that emotions are messages, like really important messages about our safety and our well-being, about whether our relationships are working for us or not, about whether this, whatever, like all kinds of different situations. And so we have to be able to like listen to that. So to be a sensitive child or somebody who is more kind of able to really read what's going on for them, it is I mean, it can be hard for sure. It's not a walk in the park for those people, but
Hmm.
it is an advantage because to be able to receive and really read those messages and then to learn the tools for being able to then let them go and really let that emotion leave the body and take that information and invite your logical brain in and come up with solutions to your problems or set that boundary that needs to be set or whatever the situation calls for. That is so valuable because so many people are walking through life. I think that's what so many of us adults are struggling with because we weren't taught those tools and we were taught to disconnect from our bodies and our emotions, our instincts. And so we aren't able to understand that that person's given off some red flags or this doesn't seem like a safe situation or whatever. So to be able to read that is really, really valuable for sure.
And in peaceful parenting, we talk about like the emotional backpack, where you're carrying your body is the container of your emotions, and emotions were not meant to be stored there permanently. They're meant to pass through, right? Like although I said container, but it's really not a storage container. It's meant to be like a experience container, and then the experience passes, right? So if we don't feel our feelings, we're actually less resilient. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I often will describe emotions as like, they come crashing in like a wave, of water in the ocean. And so they feel really, really intense a lot of times. Whether it's something pleasurable to feel like joy or excitement, or whether it's something really challenging to feel like, grief, anger, things like that. It comes crashing in so often, but just like a wave, it goes back into the ocean, it flows out. And so the emotions are supposed to come in and then flow out and come in and flow out. But we're kind of creating these dams through, emotional suppression to where that
Yeah.
water's flowing in and it's getting stuck. And then that opens up a whole can of worms, a whole bunch of lovely problems to deal with throughout life.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about like anger and rage, and anger is a defense emotion, right? Like, so it prevents you from feeling the vulnerable waves that are coming and going, but it also like blocks them. If you don't experience them, then the anger kind of you're like self-barricading really, and then you're trapped, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, there's some situations where anger is, it's really there to protect us. If you just got smacked in the face by your 2-year-old, it's reasonable that your nervous system would come in and be like, we're under attack, and then some anger would come up because that's going to help you initiate the fight or the flight movements and behaviors that need to happen. But it's also tricky because that's your 2-year-old. It's not an actual a threat. And then there's other times where anger is really, it's, it's kind of masking underlying fear or underlying feelings of shame or inadequacy and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Either way, you want to feel it, you want to receive
Mm-hmm.
it, and then, you know, allow for that to leave the body, invite the logical brain in, rationalize the situation and make your next move intentionally, hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
as much as we can. None of us are perfect.
Right. Yeah, yeah, right. And so what's one of the most important things that parents can do to teach their children about emotion regulation? We
Well,
talked a lot about like practical tools and applications. Yeah, if you're anything kind of related to that.
yeah. I mean, the number one thing, and I have, this is something that so many parents come to me about. They're like, yeah, I care about my own well-being, but like my kids, this is who I want to help. And they're like, okay, like, yeah, I mean, when they cry, I just like hold them or I just hold space for them, meaning like I just kind of sit nearby and allow them, like, what else can I do? And the first thing to really understand is that that is massive. To be able to just hold your child if they'll let you, give them a kiss on their boo-boo, just sit nearby while they are letting out the chaotic expressions of their emotions. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be a lot. As long as you, the parent, are staying regulated, your child's nervous system is going to mirror that. That is co-regulation. And this is something that goes on regardless of their age. Even if our 20-year-old child comes to us and is distraught because of whatever young adult thing happened, like if you're there with them and you're listening and you're staying calm and or at least regulated, doesn't have to be calm, but regulated, and you're offering support, that's co-regulation. So that's the number one thing, is we're actually doing really, really powerful work when it seems like we're not doing much. And through that co-regulation, we are teaching our children, for one, we're setting their nervous systems up where they're being formed in relation to ours. And so we're setting them up for, instead of being like, there's threat around every corner, like a lot of us were raised, they're able to regulate kind of naturally because they had that provided
Mm-hmm.
for them. But then there's also the mirroring or the modeling that we're doing for them. And so then they're going to mirror that. So they realize, okay, when mommy's really frustrated, this is what she does. And so they're learning that, or when
Mm-hmm.
she's, faced with stress, this is what she's doing. And so that's what they're kind of naturally going to do. So that's number one. But the other thing is, there does come a point where our children around 7 or 8 are going to be able to start, kind of regulating themselves. They don't absolutely need the co-regulation, whereas young children do. They are going to start being able to do those things for themselves. And so before they get to that point, I mean, if they're older than that, that's fine too, but it's really valuable to teach them the tools, the things like taking, the different breath works, the body movements and things like that, which we can get into, to help actually regulate that nervous system so that their emotions can be regulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. Like the co-regulation is so important. And sometimes I think for parents, it doesn't feel like enough. It feels like I should, and maybe it's because they're also getting into fight or flight, and so they feel like they need to be activated. But in fact, that it's like when you feel that resistance with your own nervous system to like you're doing it wrong, you
Mhm.
actually are doing it correctly, right? Just
Yeah.
staying there, like staying and creating that safety and compassion in that space is actually what's helping your child
Mhm.
re-regulate.
Yeah, I think I think because it's such a buzzword, a buzz
Mhm.
concept right now, and people will see on social media, they're like, oh, these parents are doing all these extravagant things, like that's what has to be done. And yes, that's helpful. There's all these different ways, but literally just holding your child and like giving them a little rock, like you're putting them back into parasympathetic, when you're doing this,
Mhm.
taking them
Mhm.
out of the fight or flight, and you're bringing them back into that rest and digest, and that's like innate in us. Like who among us does not just naturally pick up their upset,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, small child and just start rocking, or even their older child, you know, it's just this kind of natural thing. So yeah, it doesn't have to be extravagant. It's very simple at its core, but also there are other things that we can do to elevate it even more.
Yeah. And what if a child, let's say, like maybe is a preteen or even a teenager, or school age, can they still learn to self-regulate? You mentioned that like 7 or 8 is when they kind of start to learn to do it a little bit more on their own. Of course, there could be some, delays and with maybe neurodiversity or something like that. But generally, that's kind of the age range. But yeah, anything else in terms of like, can they still learn this if they haven't yet and they're a little older?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the common concerns that I get from parents is, I didn't know this stuff when my kids were young. Is it too late for them? Or I'm just learning this. I don't even know how to model it for them quite yet. Like, are they doomed? And no, for one, the brain is beautifully elastic. So we have this neuroplasticity. So we're capable of changing the brain at any point in our lives. Like, you can be 80 years old, and if you dedicate yourself to a new habit or learning something new, is it more difficult then versus when you're 5? Absolutely. But it's not impossible. So so at any age, our children can learn these tools, and you at any age for your child and any age for you, as you begin to change the way in which you respond to your emotions and express your emotions, the more you learn to regulate that nervous system so that you're functioning in a more even keeled place, not so up and down, but a little more like this. Your children's nervous systems are still going to mirror yours. That's the beauty of it. I mean, that's why, your friend comes over and she's huffing and puffing and she's cursing and she's so mad, and like you're starting to, like, your heart is racing and you're like getting all flustered, or so, you can feel it even after like if you walk in after two people got in a fight and it's like it's quiet now, but you can feel that, and that's because our nervous systems are always communicating and mirroring one another's. So at any point, you can use that to your benefit. The other thing is that children in adolescence, I think most of us know that our children between birth and 3 years old, and then also, birth to 5 years old, but especially in the first 3 years, their brains are developing the most rapidly, the most development that they'll have in their whole life. But in their adolescence, they go through a similar developmental phase, with their brain development. Now, it's not as, condensed as and intense as in those first 5 years, but it is a really, really valuable brain development time when you can really start to kind of shift and change. So it's great news for, if you recognize that your adolescent or even your preteen maybe doesn't have a secure attachment with you and you want to mend that, or if you are just learning how to regulate yourself and you want to teach these tools and you want to at least co-regulate with them in a way that you were never able to do with them, and attune with them in a way that you were never able to do. It's such a important sponge like time for their brains.
Yeah. I guess like it's never too late to start, and it's best to start earlier. The earlier, the better. Yeah, I'd love for you to talk us through some really practical tools because, I think it is really hard to kind of remember the theory for parents in the moment, of course, because we're in fight or flight too sometimes. And what are some practical tools that can kind of support us, maybe preventatively, but also in the moment and anything after the fact as well?
So I do want to just say before I get into that, on the topic of like older kids and kind of, you said, it's never too late. I have clients who, are in their 60s, they're well into their adulthood and they have adult children, maybe they even have grandchildren, and they've come to me because they want more of the trauma healing. They're not really, looking for the parenting stuff. They're looking for that, how do I heal from my trauma? And through the healing that they do, they will come back. I've had, a few of them come back and they said, I'm like, okay, how's your relationship with your children? In one case, they were estranged. She had no relationship with her children. It was such a source of pain for her. And they're at a point where, her son has started contacting her, and they're starting to build a relationship again. And it's not because she did anything to them or for them. It's because she did that for herself. And that was reflected in the way that she listened, in the way that she spoke, in the way that she showed up. So again, it's absolutely never, ever too late, regardless of how old you or your kids are. So
Yeah, well, I think I just want to say like testament for sure to that, because when the parent changes, the child changes. And when the parent changes, the other person, when one person changes, the relationship changes. So yeah, for sure. Love that.
yeah, there's a great book called The Dance of Anger. And she, kind of talks about relationships as a dance. And it's very much that way. Like when you both, you and your kid, or you and your partner, or whoever, have been functioning and, kind of doing the same dance moves over and over again. And then you change your dance moves, like, well, you can't keep dancing together.
Yeah.
So they're out or they're going to keep dancing,
Yeah.
Usually they're like, okay, I don't really like this. This is uncomfortable, but I guess I have to change my dance moves, So,
Yeah. To learn something new.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so practical tips. So the key really is for you to practice this each day. Now, like I said, you can start with your children from a young age. Like if you have a toddler, you can invite them to do these things with you. If you have an older kid, invite them. Obviously, this should always be child-led. Like you're not forcing your kids into doing these things with you. We're not bribing them. There's no manipulation. It's just you're practicing this in the presence of your children or on your own. So you want to practice each day. And if you're practicing with your children, you want to really make it fun, even for your teenager. Like make it something that you guys can really connect over, make it fun, like get silly, things like that. So a few simple things that you can do each day to regulate your nervous system so that you're going into the stressful situations. And so that, and then, you're teaching your children this so that they're going into the stressful situations, at school or wherever they are, already more regulated. And so a couple things, a few simple things that you can work on with your kids. One that my daughter really loves is we'll rub our hands together really, really fast and try to create some heat. And then when you feel that heat, put it on your chest, take a couple breaths, and just absorb that heat and just sit with it for a moment. And it doesn't seem like much, but boy, does it help your nervous system, the vagus nerve, and everything. So that's one. Another thing that you can do to really stimulate your vagus nerve, which is the largest cranial nerve and goes down into your gut area, and really, really important to kind of stimulate that and soothe that. It helps you go from, the fight or flight into the rest and digest. So another one is really just simply doing a very kind of, let me get my hair out of the way. So we're just doing like a very light massage under the ear. Right here, we do have some some important arteries here, so don't like be pushing super hard, but just really kind of breathing and just give a little massage. So that's one. Another one is doing some tongue circles. So we're gonna move our tongue over the top of our teeth and then the roof of our mouth, forming little circles. So
And these are kind of like fun, almost like kids games too, if you're practice them when they're not upset. I'd love to ask you, and I definitely want to keep going with more tools. I'm just wondering, how do you get a child to participate in something like this if they're in fight or flight and they're angry, maybe at you? How do you get them
right.
to do these in the moment? Or is it more like a little bit after the peak and then you kind of start to like introduce?
Yeah, so you want to introduce these when your child is calm, just like you want to practice every day, even if you're feeling fine. You want to practice with your kids because you want them, you're trying to help them form a habit. You want them to associate this with something pleasurable, something enjoyable, maybe a source of connection. And then, if you want this to be accessible to them in the heat of the moment, just like if you want it to be accessible to you in the heat of the moment, it has to be integrated into your brain, into your muscle memory. Like it has to be something that's like second nature. So you really have to practice. And it doesn't have to take that long. It can take 2 to 5 minutes a day of doing this to really start to see results within, a week, few weeks, a month, depending on the person. So that's really is the first thing is you want to practice with your kids when they're feeling fine. When they're in the heat of the moment, there isn't a lot of control that we have. Now, yes, you can kind of just start naturally. That was me itching my eye. I'm not doing a technique. But sometimes like if my daughter's like really upset, like now, and this is not when she's like full chaos. This is her kind of more like, she kind of does her little pushy thing and she's making her obnoxious little sound that she likes to do in my face when she's upset. Like it's more like, okay, it's regulated, she's upset, but she's not like full blown tantrum at this.
Right. Yeah.
So, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just start to kind of do some techniques myself. And, and I'm kind of like, oh man, yeah, I can see you're so frustrated. Like, that's so frustrating. And then sometimes I'm like, you know what I do when I'm frustrated? Like, and I just start breathing, or I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling frustrated now too. Oh my God, that is so frustrating. I can't believe that didn't work out. Oh my God. Oh, I'm so frustrated. I need to get this frustration on my body. Do you want to join me? And I just kind of start putting it kind of on me, but helping, and sometimes she's like, it starts to make her laugh, or sometimes she wants to do it with me. Sometimes she's like, oh, hell no, mom, like, screw you, not into it. I'm really angry and I'm going to hit you harder now. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done doing that, and now it's just about really kind of holding that space for her and keeping us safe and things like that. And then once she's calmed down, okay, let's talk about what you were going through and how that felt in your body and how that felt in your mind, in emotionally and all of that. And, you feel like sometimes, it's helpful to do some techniques to help get the rest of that energy out of our bodies. Like my daughter tends to be someone who ruminates a lot. She holds on to things and her mind goes to like the darkest, worst case scenario, and everything is so extreme. Like, so you're saying I can never eat candy ever again in my whole life? I'm like, nobody ever said that. Like, that's just, that's how she is, and so really helping her release that energy from her body, really getting rid of that emotion once she's received it and felt it. That helps so that she's not going to those like deep, extreme places in her mind and ruminating, and she's still upset 5 hours later or the next morning, things like that. So, so I hope that helps. Yeah. So it's more kind of like upset, but not fully escalated. And then also like after the fact, in full escalation, you can certainly try to prompt them, but there's a good chance. I mean, when someone, if I was like super upset, like hysterically crying, and someone was like, just breathe with me, I'd be like,
right.
I'm going to go ahead and cry hysterically. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I guess it's great for parents to know, like, there's a place and time for some of these things, and it won't always be 100% foolproof because it's an emotional experience. It varies by person. The magnitude is always different. The emotion is different. And so use it as a guideline, as a resource, and practicing, like you said, is really the most important, so that you don't have, it's so hard to make that conscious shift to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. But if it's kind of that muscle memory is on your side, it's easier to move, to get moving, right? And to transition.
Yeah, and, there's a time and a place for, things like screaming and whatever, just the more like not appropriate, not socially appropriate expressions of some of our emotions. Like if I'm at home and I need to cry hysterically, or if I'm alone in my office and, don't work with other people in the office. And I'm, experience something frustrating and I need to scream, like, that's okay. Get it out, like, get the emotion out, express it, regulate. But if I'm with my child and I need to scream, that's going to freak her out. So I should find something else. Or if I'm in the middle of the grocery store and I suddenly have this wave of grief hit me, and I feel like I'm about to hysterically cry, not really the best time for that. I need to find another way to kind of express that emotion until I can get to the car and be by myself and cry, or whatever the thing. For us moms, a lot of times it's like we put the kids to bed and now we're like, put on the sad song and invite all the feelings that we were setting aside all day, like, bring them back. Okay, now it's time to feel all the things.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, like, we don't want to use regulation as this excuse or this way of suppressing. Like, we don't want to rush in to make our kids stop crying and stop feeling angry or stop feeling sad, or, it's like, and just like with us, like, we don't want to stop the feeling. We have to feel it. We have to receive the message. We have to teach our children that emotions are waves and they come in and they're intense and then they go away. So that they don't become the adult that's like, I can't cry. I can't start crying. I want to cry, but I can't start crying because I will never stop if I don't stop, if I let myself start. And like, no shame to those people. Like, that's hard, but it's because that they never learned that emotions are fleeting. They will come and they'll be hard and they'll go. Or they're not always hard, but a lot of times they're hard. And then they're going to go. So we have to let ourselves and our kids feel before we start the process of like, let's help get this out and away. Done with it.
Yeah, and really befriending all emotions, welcoming all emotions, but of course setting limits on behavior and and kind of what the expression of the emotion is limited to the appropriate environment, right? But the feeling of it somatically and psychologically is always welcome.
Absolutely.
Any other kind of final wrap-up words as we wrap up? So much insight shared with us today. I know that this is going to be a really valuable discussion for parents.
Yeah, I just really want to help parents understand that so often we feel like we're not good enough and we're not doing enough. And in many cases, you're doing a great job. Like, you're kissing your kids' boo-boos and you're rocking them when they're upset and you're holding space. And when they're sad, you're like, oh, and like all of those things are really, really powerful in teaching your child so much and helping them, regulate and learn tools in really subtle but powerful ways.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. Thank you so much. So much expertise. And we're so grateful to have you here. And would you share a little bit about your freebie or gift for the audience that you have today?
Sure. Yeah. So I have it's a brief read and a ebook that you can download called it's all about the counter will instinct. So the counter will instinct is something that we all have in us, but it's much more active when our children are young. And it really just helps you understand kind of why the more coercive or controlling, manipulating tactics in parenting aren't always very, beneficial and can potentially create bigger behavioral problems in the long run. So it kind of helps you understand that, and then also gives you some alternatives of like, okay, well, I'm not doing the coercive, the controlling thing. What can I do? So yeah.
I think that's going to be exciting, especially for parents that struggle with maybe defiant children or some just resistance in the relationship where they feel like they don't have as much influence over their child to get them to cooperate. I think this will be a really great resource.
Yeah.
So
it has some really good information for the parents of children with strong wills, the strong-willed
yes,
child.
the strong-willed child. Yeah.
The total paradigm
perspective shift.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And everybody, you'll be able to find all of Emilie's links below this video so you can learn more about the Peaceful Mother and her work. Yes. And thank you so much, Emilie, for your time. Really appreciate having you here today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.